I know this video is late. Sue me, get over it. It's been too hot to record. I've been too busy to record. Am I whining? Yes, maybe. Get over it. I love you. Let's talk about the books that I read last month. Do we even remember last month? June 2020. Let's do it. So first things first, I did something absolutely silly and I read the Hunger Games trilogy in a matter of 24 hours. Why? Well, no good reason. The reason was that the new prequel novel had just come out, Songbird of Ballad and Snakes of Ice and Fire, something along those lines, by Suzanne Collins, talking about the story of Coriolanus. Does anyone know how to say his name? Snow, the villain of the original trilogy, and I wanted to read that, and in preparation of reading that, I needed to revisit the trilogy that I hadn't read since 2016. So I did. Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay, all within 24-ish hours. Took me just a little bit longer. I did get some sleep, probably a little bit too much sleep, but that was an exhausting 24 hours. It was fun to be able to kind of like monster through those three books in that amount of time. I would only say do it if you've read the books before and you don't have to limit yourself to 24 hours only. That was the part that was a little bit grueling, but I try to read each book in about 4 to 5 hours, giving me a few breaks here and there. It was an interesting experience. The books still hold up, by the way. Hunger Games, 5 stars. Incredible, did some great things for the genre. Catching Fire, a lot of people's favorites. I bumped it up to 5 stars as well. I think in the past I had it at 4 stars, 4.5 stars. I went ahead and bumped it up to 5. Deserves it. Mockingjay, I don't think that, I'm not sad about it like a lot of people were, whether it comes to the books or the movies, but I don't think that Mockingjay lives up to what the first 2 books did, and I think I brought that down to about 4 stars still. Incredible, impeccable series. It will be interesting to see what the prequel has to offer. And then I read The Marvelous Land of Oz by L. Frank Baum. It's the second book in the Oz series, and this one was super intriguing because I knew the story of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Most of us do, at least in part from the movie. There were a few surprises in that first book. But here in the second book, even having seen Return to Oz, which is kind of an amalgamation of this book, The Marvelous Land of Oz, and the next book, Ozma of Oz, and putting them together, but picking and choosing and a lot of liberties there, like they did with the first book. This still was pretty unfamiliar territory for me. We get a whole new cast of characters. The main character is not even Dorothy Gale herself. In fact, we've got a young boy that is from the Land of Oz named Pip that we follow throughout the story, along with a new cast of friends that he wanders around with. We do see the return of the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow, 2 key figures from the first story, brought here in the second story, but again, 3 or 4 new characters in Pip's crew. And it is a weird, silly story, but it was a fun one, and looking forward to continuing that series. You'll be able to watch the review soon, where my wife and I will talk through our experience with this second book as we did with the first. For the next book, you're going to want to make sure that you've seen my Black Lives Matter video. I put out just kind of an unexpected video at the start of June, saying that I kind of wanted to rearrange some of my reading order, and I had some books in my backlog that I wanted to bring to the forefront by Black authors about Black characters that I wanted to read. This book was one of them, Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. And it is a West African inspired young adult fantasy book, start to a series where magic is kind of vanquished from the land and this young girl is working to bring magic back. The cover is absolutely beautiful. The artwork on the front is absolutely stunning. The character work is really good. We've got different viewpoints, points of views from different of the protagonists and characters throughout the story, which gives us an insight and gives us plenty of time with each character. I thought it was a lengthy book for what it told, for the story that it told, but it was still good. There's an expansive magic system. There's a lot that's going on. There's purpose and drive from the beginning to the end. And although it did feel at times like the book was dragging, overall, it was such an enjoyable ride. After attempting to read The Hunger Games in 24 hours, I needed a mental break, so I went to a children's fantasy book called The Witches by Roald Dahl. I had never read The Witches. I had read other Dahl books like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach, of course, but had never read or even heard about The Witches until I saw that they were remaking the movie here later in October. And so a friend and I decided we were going to buddy read this book together, and then I would bring him on Dragon Army to talk about it with me, to review the book together. And so we'll do that, be looking for that at a later time. But for now, share with you some quick thoughts of The Witches. It's actually really scary, especially for a children's book. I've never read a children's book that is this scary. And I was a big fan in elementary, middle school about ghost stories and Are You Afraid of the Dark and different things like that. But this has, the whole premise is there's witches and they're real and they like to kill children. It doesn't sound like a children's book. The Witches is about this young boy, I think he's nameless, and his grandmother, and they go on a trip together, find out witches are real, and that the witch convention is happening at their same hotel. And so the boy's getting wrapped up in all of this, and ultimately him and his grandmother and one other boy that's just a side character are trying to overthrow all the witches now that they're there in one location. It's silly, it's absurd, it's scary, but it's fun. Super easy read. And would I let my young child read it? No. I'll read it to them. And then the book that will surely be my favorite read of 2020, unless something happens dramatically between here and the end of the year. It is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. And it checked all of the boxes for me and what I like in a young adult fantasy magic. Dragons? Like, it's got everything that I want as a reader. It's pitched as Game of Thrones meets Gladiator, but I prefer Ender's Game meets Red Rising, which, if you know anything about me, those are my two favorite books and book series. Smashing them together, and you get this is again a black author writing about black characters, and it is epic. In this story, we follow the character Tau Solari, I believe, and he is a young man in military training to defend his nation, his country, on this new land that they came to about 100, maybe 200 years previously, but they're still fighting the natives there. And he gets caught up in this plot for revenge, seeking out the men responsible for a terrible injustice done to Tau. Of course, it isn't just the revenge story. It becomes something much more than that, and Tau gets wrapped up in a much larger narrative at hand. And listen, there is a lot of rage, a lot of killing, a lot of, maybe not a lot of dragons, but at least enough dragon to kind of like set the scene. There's some kind of magic system that's going on that I haven't really seen before, because it's got layers. It's got the it's got the physical and it's got the metaphysical layer behind it that you don't even find out about until halfway through the book. This is one of those books where I zoomed through it incredibly fast, and I wanted to immediately do a reread of it to pick up all of the pieces that I missed. So it will not surprise me if before 2020 ends, I will have already reread The Rage of Dragons at least one more time. Finally, I read 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. This classic sci-fi literature was a lot of fun, but it was not what I thought it would be. Okay, I've not seen the movie, but I'm steeped enough into sci-fi, right, as just a genre, that I know about HAL, and I know some of the movie scenes. In my understanding, the movie is heavily about that HAL computer and the humans interacting with that computer, and that's kind of the narrative here in the movie. That's not the narrative here in the book. The book has kind of three different parts with three different main characters or protagonists that we're following, all the way from millions of years ago with like prehistoric humans. And then we've got one that's just traveling to a space center or something. And then we've got our final cast of characters that are interacting with Hal out in space. This book is a trip. It's really weird, but it's weird in all the right ways. It's classic sci-fi, but it's classic sci-fi in all the right ways. It's a pretty engrossing read. I was glued from the beginning to the end. It's a quick read. So if you're looking for some classic sci-fi in your reading diet, then 2001: A Space Odyssey might be it, but don't go in thinking that you're going to get the movie. Alright, once again, I understand that this video is late, but let me know what you read in June. If you've read any of these books that I talked about, please let me know, especially if it was The Rage of Dragons. Would love to know your opinions on that book. And then I'm already into the month of July, already know what I'm reading, so still send me your suggestions of what books I should read, especially knowing what I liked and didn't like of this previous set of books. As always, thank you for watching this video, for clicking like. If you haven't yet, click subscribe so that you can join the Dragon Army, and we'll see you in the next video.